Apparently one project car isn't enough, so you know, let's just throw another one in the mix. I've been so excited and consumed with the E92 project, just wanting to get all the parts and start building that car because it needs so much work. But we cannot forget about the 135. Right now we are on a deadline with this car and we need to finish the build, or at least get it to a point where it's presentable by mid-February for Beamer Invasion in Orlando, Florida. So while of course we'll still be making content on the E92 M3 as parts arrive, we really need to get cracking on this car. There's still a ton of stuff left to do. Most importantly, we have to finish the bodywork. This for sure is going to take the most amount of time. We have bodywork to do, we have paint to do, and that is not easy stuff to take care of. So finally my flare showed up for the 135 and it is so cool to see it starting to take shape. The front was already so wide with the OEM conversion. We were just waiting on those rear flares, but looking at it now, this car is going to be so good when it's done. It's also really cool to see the Jerez black metallic next to the jet black. They are very, very different colors. So once you actually see them in person, you can really tell the distinct difference between the two colors. So all of this will be coming up in a future video, but today we're going to focus a little bit on the 135 and the E92 M3. Time to throw some brakes on the Oneer. The brakes that the 135 came with aren't terrible, but I figured we could probably upgrade them. So I went with cross-drilled rotors from R1 Concepts as well as their ceramic street performance pads. Should reduce the brake dust a little bit and at the same time help out with performance. This will give you an idea of what they look like beforehand and of course what they look like after. All right, guys, first things first, gonna remove these studs from the hub. I like to use this wire brush attachment to try and remove as much of the corrosion and just old Loctite as possible. Just clean these up before we put them back in later. And then you have two Torx bolts on each side of the caliper. On the other side of each bolt is a guide pin that keeps each caliper in place. After that, there's two larger 10mm Allen bolts. More than likely, you're gonna have to use a breaker bar to get these off. It's like 80 foot-pounds of torque holding these things on. Once you remove the two 10mm, the caliper will come off. Just gotta give it a little bit of a shake. Now I'm just removing the old pads. These actually aren't that bad, but since we're already doing new rotors, we're just gonna do new pads as well. Make sure you tie the caliper up so it's not dangling by the brake line. And then you just have one smaller Allen bolt holding on that rotor. Make sure you wear a mask for this next part if you are gonna do this. But you definitely wanna use a wire brush or something to just get rid of all the corrosion and rust that's on the hub. You want as clean of a contact as possible when putting the new rotors and of course your wheel on later. And now I'm using a wire brush attachment on my drill to get as much of this corrosion and rust off of the brake dust shield. I sort of feel like if you're going to be putting on these nice new pretty rotors, you definitely don't want some filthy dust shield right behind it. It just makes everything look super dirty. Extra credit, clean up the little bolt that's holding in the rotor. Use a little bit of brake cleaner to clean everything off. Now you want to throw on a little bit of anti-seize lubricant onto the hub. This will make sure that in the future when you have to do brakes again, your rotor isn't actually seized to the hub. Time to throw the rotor back on, throw in that rotor bolt. Now I like to use a little bit of brake cleaner on a rag and just clean up the inside of the caliper. Now I'm just throwing on a little bit of brake pad lubricant anywhere I feel like this brake pad is going to be making contact with the actual brake caliper so we don't hear any squeaks. And now we can throw on the actual caliper onto the rotor. And then lastly, I can throw in my caliper guide pins. And then all we have left to do is throw back on the stud conversion kit. All right, just finished up the fronts. They look pretty good. One thing I would recommend is if you guys are planning on cleaning the little dust shield in the back, maybe just better off buying a new one. They're not that expensive. Save yourself about 20 minutes of just grinding away all that crap. But yeah, I think this turned out really good. Brakes in general are just never fun to do, super dirty. These calipers are in really rough condition, so I think at some point we'll probably end up pulling them off and just having them re-powder coated. But for now, this works. And brakes are done. Front left looking freaking spicy. Rear looking good. All right, so everything is good there. Now it's time to throw the wheels back on, torque everything back down, head out in the car, and of course, bed in the brakes. All in all, a pretty easy process, not too difficult to do. time I walk in the garage, it reeks of fuel. If you guys remember in the introduction video of this E92, we talked a little bit about this fuel send unit on my E92 M3 and how the tops just tend to crack over time. Mine has probably never been replaced, and you'll just find over time that there tends to be little micro cracks that happen in the top of this plastic, and then fuel eventually escapes through those cracks, and that fuel will end up pooling all the way around here, and it just smells so bad. That fuel is basically just sitting on top of your gas tank. Not to mention that's pretty unsafe, but I went ahead and got the OEM replacement kit from BMW. I'll have it all linked down below. Let's get into it. Here's the actual unit, and when you guys buy this replacement kit, it also comes with these two O-rings that you'll also be replacing. And then I went ahead and picked this tool up on Amazon, and this allows you to actually remove the unit from the car. We're gonna be working in the back seat today, so you guys are gonna want to move the seats all the way up, and then of course remove the back seats. We're gonna have to make sure we clean all this up afterwards. Pretty gross. Go ahead and pull these covers back. So right there, you guys can see all of the cracking that's happening, and that is what is allowing all the fuel to seep out. The car has nearly an empty tank, so I just wanted to make sure that I drained as much gas as possible before I did this. All right, so once you remove all the 10 millimeters and these caps, first thing that you're gonna wanna do is unplug the low pressure fuel pump. It is the bigger plug that is on top of this cap. Once you have that unplugged, what we're gonna do is start the car 2 or 3 times to relieve the fuel pressure in the lines. It's obviously not gonna start because it's not sending any fuel, but you wanna do this just to relieve that pressure. Once that fuel pressure has been relieved, we're gonna go ahead and start pulling out all of the plugs, all of the lines. On top of the send unit, you're gonna have this fuel line right here. It's kind of difficult to get off, but you need to press it all the way in and then pull on the gray cap, and you should be able to release that fuel line. Then what we wanna do is remove these metal discs on top. They are going to be extremely tight, so you might have to use a breaker bar. It's a very tight fit, so you might have to wrestle it out of there a little bit. Gonna disconnect this hose right here, just so we have a little bit more room. So you see these 3 lines right there. There's like an orangish one on top and 2 black ones. That's the one that we need to remove. That actually goes over to the send unit. And then we're gonna pull that all the way through over to this side. And then we have to feed the new one in and send that line all the way back over through the tank and clip it back into the main unit over here. Now it's gonna be a good time to replace those green O-rings. We'll just go ahead and replace the one that's on the low pressure fuel pump side. And now I'm actually removing the fuel send unit, which is what we are gonna be replacing. You sort of have to wrestle this thing out of there. It's a really tight fit. Lots of hoses and wires. There's definitely gonna be a little bit of fuel coming out of the end of this line, so just be careful not to get it all over your car. Now's a good time to go ahead and replace that other green O-ring. And so now we gotta feed the new line on the send unit all the way over to the other side of the tank so we can plug it back into the low pressure fuel pump unit. This part is kind of difficult. It's gonna take a little bit of time, but once you get it over to the other side, you'll be able to fish it up and then plug it in. All right, just got the fuel line over from the send side. You may or may not have to stick your hand in there into the gas and grab it. That's what I had to do. Kind of tedious. If you have any cuts, it might burn a little bit, but we got her done. So now we just have to put everything back together, make sure obviously that you're using all the new gaskets, and overall not too bad of a process. All right, not too bad. Now that we have the fuel send unit replaced, let's go ahead and see if it starts. All right, baby, don't let me down. Yeah, there she is. All right, that worked out. I have some really loud pulleys right now. They're just squeaking at startup. And I think the belt needs to be replaced as well. So I ordered an entire kit. Once we do all the motor mounts and the bearings and everything, we'll do all of that at once. Just a lot easier that way. But man, I am looking forward to not having a garage that smells like fuel every time I walk into it. Another extremely common issue with these cars are the hood and trunk shocks. This is the current setup right now in order to hold this hood up. Obviously that's not gonna work. And for the trunk, it's the same story. Being that the trunk folds up pretty far, it'll actually stay open, but you can feel when you close it, there's just like no support when you're actually closing the trunk. This is actually an entire kit that I just bought from Turner Motorsports. I'll have this link down below for you guys, but it is the 2 front ones for the hood and the 2 rear ones for the trunk. 5-minute job, super easy. That's what you don't want to see with your hood shocks. So much better. All right, this next part, it's not gonna be fun. We gotta remove this tint. A few main reasons why I want to remove this tint. One, it's beginning to discolor. Second reason is I think this tint has just been on for a while and it's starting to bubble and even peel up in some of the corners. And lastly, I just think these cars look better without tint. I recently also removed the tint off of the 1 Series because I just think it looks better overall. I'm fully aware that that's probably an unpopular opinion among most people, but I really do believe that all of the E Series cars and earlier just look better without window tint. So the removal of the window tint itself is the easy part. Getting rid of all of the adhesive and the glue, that's the time-consuming part that can definitely be a pain. I've seen quite a few different methods online of how people do this. Some people use heat, some people use steamers, which I think is probably the best idea when it comes to getting rid of the actual adhesive. But I'm just gonna use what I have here in the garage, a little bit of Goo Gone, a rag, and then a plastic razor blade, and just take the time to get as much of this adhesive off as possible. Something about a nice, clean, clear piece of glass that is so satisfying. I'm already loving the way that this looks without tint. I just think it looks so much more classic and clean. I also love that you can see the interior now. If this was a car that was sitting outside and I was worried about the elements, the sun damaging the interior, then maybe I would consider having it retinted, but I don't know, man. I've been a big fan of no tint cars lately, and I think especially on these E-chassis, just looks really good. I ended up switching over to a metal razor blade. Seems to work a lot better than a plastic. You also have to remember that these windows go up on the coupe when you close the door. So you gotta go inside and get in between here and everything too. That can sort of be a pain, you just gotta take your time with it though. But I'm gonna get working, I'm gonna take off the rest of this tint and show you guys what it looks like when it's finished. The M3 is now a fish bowl. That took a lot of work. I've got some techniques for you guys that might help if you have to do this to your car. So the rear is probably gonna be the most difficult for you guys. You're really limited on space and room. I ended up taking the headrests off and then I dropped this piece up here and it just made accessing the tint in the corners a lot easier. But I started playing with techniques when I got over to the passenger side and eventually I figured out a method that I think works a lot better. You just use a little bit of heat on the entire window and pull really slowly. If you pull it fast, it's gonna leave adhesive on the window. But if you really take your time with it, you can actually keep the adhesive on the tint rather than the window. It's gonna take time no matter what you do, but at least this way there's less cleanup because you're not shaving off that old adhesive everywhere. All in all, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Everything is super clean. I love that you can see into the car now. You can clearly see that it has the red interior and that it's in good condition. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old, but I really do prefer this car without window tint. I just think overall it looks a lot better. I I ended up finding a replacement for this cup holder. However, it's a little bit different. It has like the silver piece on it. It was like $40 cheaper than the original BMW one, so I figured I'd try it out. But let's go ahead and replace it, make sure it fits, and at least it functions. Fits and works. A lot faster too. I think what I'll do is I'll just buy the other one that goes over here. All right, guys, so that is gonna wrap up today's video. Of course, we have a lot more work to do on both of these cars, especially with this one. We are on a time crunch with the 135, but we're gonna make it happen. Keep tuning in to the videos. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.